Okay, now it's official. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to this faculty lecture series. I am Professor Eric Atkinson, and for the next 40 minutes, I'll be talking about comic books. Yay! So mostly what we'll be focusing on is comic books and how those images, what can we learn about ourselves, about our culture through those images. So what we're going to be talking about mostly is the behind the scenes, the underneath of it, the things, the difference between definition and meaning, and how comic books try to conflate the two to make sure that to make it look like they're both the same thing at the same time. We're going to be talking about the image, how to spot a comic book character, something called the gutter. We're going to be talking about the relationship between wording and visual, because that's what comic books are. Color, how color works in comics, and how figures themselves work in comics. So the first thing we're going to talk about, definition, is what's explicitly stated. This is where you will see something like this. You look up on the dictionary and it'll say noun, rose. It gives you the definition. It's a long stem. It's been used for this many hundreds of years for perfume. All those things, those particulars pieces of information. Meaning is what's different there is meaning is what's beyond what's explicitly stated. What's beyond what's explicitly stated here. So meaning is for a rose would be something like a rose means different if you hand somebody a rose, different colored roses. Red roses mean particular things, white roses mean particular things, or even black roses mean particular things. Notice how those are not all captured in the definition. So what we're talking about is meaning, how they are different. So what this means in context is meaning is, especially for comic books, meaning is derived from what's happening around the focus, the thing that the artist is telling us this is what you need to see. The things that are going on in the background, how the character is standing, the colors that's used, those kind of things. Those give us meaning. So it's about how focus is used and how that aim of the focus tells us what's important to pull away from the images we're looking at. But what we really need to talk about is how an image tends to promote the idea that definition and meaning are one and the same. So when we see Superman, when we see particular characters in comic books, they look a particular way for a particular reason, because we're picking up social cues that tells us what those things mean. So like this. Cosplayer, we automatically know he's supposed to be who? The Flash. But kind of, I just love this picture because it looks like it's felt. It's a felt costume. It's just awesome, it's great. But this is what I mean. This is so even though he doesn't look explicitly like the Flash, we get to say, oh, okay. We understand what he's going for. So like this, what is this? I need audience participation for this. This is a heart. So does this actually pump blood? No. No, it doesn't. This is a visual metaphor. What we're talking about here is how visual metaphors, things that stand in for things in the real world, are not just taken as the heart, but also can stand in for things like pride, courage, love, stuff like that, right? But there's also a connotation here with etymology. Anybody remember what etymology is?
Meaning of words?
The history of words. The history of words and where they came from. So this particular visual metaphor is really, really old. This is, the ancient Greeks and Romans used this. Not too dissimilar to the way we now use it. We use it more for romantic love. They use it more for lustful love. In fact, there's some anecdotal evidence that suggests that this is supposed to be a depiction of a woman bent over. So the thing about etymology is it's not just about the study about the history of the words or where they come from. You also have to understand once you say something or you use something like this, you're bringing that entire history along with it. So anybody who dotted their I's in junior high school with little hearts, you were actually dotting your I's with little butts. That's the point here. So what we're talking about here is how that history, that etymology is used in comics to create meaning. Like this. Now, serious question, does he have hair? Well, this is important because the metaphor here tells us he's got hair. But he doesn't have hair, but yes, it does tell us he's got hair. And this is the problem with metaphors. They stand in for something, but largely they get taken up as the thing. And that's the problem. They aren't the thing. They just get taken up as the thing. And this is how comic books work, how we know villain, how we know angry, how we know sexy, how we know, because these things rely on tropes and ideas and knowledge that we've already accepted in our culture. So like this. This is a very, very famous painting by Rene Magritte called The Treachery of Images. And it was hailed as this masterpiece because what it's doing is it's actually calling out that the difference between accepted metaphor and how that metaphor is taken up as the thing, because it's telling you this is not a pipe. This is a picture of a pipe. This is the problem. So this is actually calling out. Comic books don't rely on that. They say this is the strong man, right? So like this relates to comics. Because Will Eisner, who is largely the father of comic book studies, he wrote The Spirit, the comic book character, superhero, for many, many years. It was a newspaper superhero. He argues that the use of characters' physicality speeds the reader into the plot and gives the teller reader acceptance of the characters. So basically what he's saying is that comic books work on stereotypes, visual stereotypes that we accept. That's how they work. So the idea is that meaning is derived through vague specificity. Vague specificity is a term that's been used throughout psychology, and I'm using it now, that talks about how when a question is asked, let's say you call an office and ask for your friend, and they say, no, she can't come to the phone right now, can I take a message? So you specifically ask for a question, but they specifically answer the question, but answered it as vaguely as possible. Vague specificity, right? So this is how comic book works. Comic books, oh, I wish I had a marker, I'd have brought one. Comic books, you can only derive meaning from 3 lines. If I drew line like this, 3 lines, not only is it a face, but it's a happy face, right? So if I change one of those lines, I can change the face, not just the face, but what it means to us. In 3 lines, how vague that can be, but we still do it. How we can look at one car and we like it because it looks like it's smiling. Or we look at an outlet and we go, oh, it looks like a face. A potato chip. Or those, I used to love David Letterman when he would talk about, he would bring people out that would have pictures of Jesus on their toast or something like that. So it's a big oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
It's all colors left.
Cool. So what I'm getting at here is we can determine that this is a face, but not just a face, a happy face. If I change this, if I change that to this, it's still a face, but the meaning has changed, right? That's what I'm talking about here, vague specificity. The idea here is, in comic books, meaning is derived by how vague what's on the page is, because that means you, the reader, have to input something specific in order to get specific information out of it, back out of it. So that's how they work. So the more specific, the more detailed something is drawn, the less work you have to do, the less you actually connect with it. So the more vague it is, the more you have to input, the more you connect with it, because the more of you're seeing in it. Does that make sense? Yeah. A little counterintuitive. Something like this. This is from a 1942 comic called Earth's Mightiest Mistake. That is Captain Marvel, or Shazam, as he's known now. It's a movie coming out next month. So from this photo, from this right here, how do we know that he's a hero?
Strong.
He's strong. The pose, right? The cleft in his chin, his hair. His suit is he's all bulging with muscles and stuff, right? He's the hero. What about the guy standing next to him? He got his arm around him. That's a sidekick. That is Steamboat. He's largely argued as one of the most racist depicted characters throughout comic book history. He is largely talked about as a slave, not a companion, not a sidekick, but a slave. And he's barely recognizable as human. His lips those are his lips, by the way. His lips usually take up more than 50% of his face. He just looks barely human. But you also have to note that this was a reflection of the time, 1942. So what we know about him is that he was the comic relief. But his comic reliefness was always derived from his race. Notice how this is supposed to be his version of this costume. And it's supposed to be a joke, right? Oh, he's trying so hard, look at that, isn't that cute? But you see how it reflects the vision of that time. Does that make sense? About how we're supposed to view not just race, but humor derived from that race. Or like this. This is Young Allies. Young Allies, it was a comic book that ran from 1942 to 1946, and it featured the sidekicks of Captain America. There's Bucky. In the movies now he's a grown man, but back then he's a sidekick like Robin. And the Human Torch's sidekick, Toro, right here. Kid Torch, right here. And what they would do is this comic was considered way ahead of its time in that it was supposed to be diverse. They were like kids that were walking around and solving crimes and beating up bad guys, kind of like Scooby-Doo. But they were considered diverse because they had the dark-skinned kid, he's Italian. They had the Irish kid, and right here, you have the smart kid because, you know, glasses always mean you're smart, right? Because once again, it relies on those stereotypes, right? So, but here you have the comic relief again, different character. This character's name is Whitewash Jones. That's his actual name, Whitewash Jones. And notice how exaggerated his features are. He is an interesting character in that he doesn't actually bring anything to the group. Like one of them was really tough, somebody else came up with a plan, somebody else was really smart, things like that. He was the comic relief, that's it. Now notice how that's tied up in his notion of his dress. He's a zoot suiter. This was 1942. Do you guys know anything about the history of the 40s and zoot suiters?
Is the zoot suit right?
Well, yeah, the zoot suit riots. Well, why?
Because it seems like it was a Hispanic Latino war.
Yeah.
So the connotation of zoot suits were considered like bad or wrong. So
Kind of. You have to remember, what you have to remember is a zoot suit was a protest clothing. We have this time during the war where if you wore a zoot suit, everything was being rationed, right? Everything was, so you wore a suit that was used extra fabric. This is a political statement. This is a political statement. So now we have somebody who's a zoot suiter making fun of zoot suiters in that he's wearing polka dots and stripes, right? So you have to also remember that this is 1942. How are the Japanese depicted here in this picture?
Villains. Yeah.
Well, how do you know that they're villains?
Their claws.
These aren't hands, they're claws. Not just the way the claws look, but the way they're positioned. This teaches us how to view them. Does that make sense? Yes. So this is what I'm talking about here. So how to spot a comic book character? They always have exaggerated physicality, always. Like you'll see a comic book character in their super suit and it's like barely containing their muscles. They're so big and buff, you can see every line. Like really? Come on. Even the women, the hair, the way everything is just exaggerated. And it's done on purpose. It's done on purpose because more than anything, heroes and villains exemplify the needs of the culture or society for the express purpose of giving the reader an example of courage or example of villainy, of fortitude, or selfishness to aspire toward or to caution away from. This idea of symmetry. This idea, we have this notion already in our society of this is what villainy looks like, therefore this is why it looks the way it does here. There's a one-to-one correlation. This equals this. Yes? So there's a correlation between who and what the character is, the percent of visuality, and how the character is meant to be understood. Like this here. So what we're really talking about is how, when something is understood, we're really talking about how these things create an image. Image in the sense of how something is, how we understand that thing. So image is about the importance of appearance. Appearance in this sense means the participation in the public performance of perspective, of what's meaningful. So the reason why Batman looks the way he does is because this is how we understand him. He appears that way. Dark, brooding, guess what he is? He's dark and brooding. Who knew? Also, how else can an alien from a faraway galaxy represent and be the paragon, our archetype, our Ubermensch? And what I'm talking about is Superman. So we see this not just in comics, but we see this in other realms, in advertising. This right here is a World War I propaganda poster meant to get men enlisted in the Army Air Corps. Notice Destroy the Mad Brute. He's got the Kaiser helmet on, the mustache, and it looks like he's beat the bejesus out of Europe. Everything's burned out over there. And he has the gall to stand on the shore of America with his bloody club. And he's literally drooling at the mouth. And she's just fainted away. Oh, I guess that's Lady Liberty, I think. Maybe. But this was repeated in 1933 with the King Kong poster. Yes? Okay. Well, what's fascinating is this teaches us something, and we love these tropes and reuse them over and over and over and over again. And this was reused for the Vogue cover in 2008. Now I've had people argue, that's not what that says, that's not what that is, and I just find it absolutely fascinating that in the 150-year publication of Vogue, he was the first African-American male ever to be on the cover. They shot many different shots, many different locations over a week, and this is the one picture they picked. I just can't break the notion that her dress looks eerily similar to hers. I just can't break that. So what does this tell us, and how are we supposed to understand him? That's fascinating. Yeah.
This is my bias, so
Okay.
take it or leave it. Based off the data that you've showed, we're supposed to view him as the public, as some type of a new creature, kind of a new.
Yeah.
You know, we're supposed to like look out and be aware,
Mhm.
be aware of him.
Yeah.
You know, whether if that's what he's trying to portray or not.
Yeah.
You know, we see it in our political statements. You know, our what's it called? Our public addresses and
Good.
stuff like that.
Because what we're really talking about, again, this is to reiterate, this is about etymology. What's already happened in history is starting to bounce again throughout. We keep using it over and over again to say the same things. So here we go. So like examples here. I chose this particular image of Superman because it's the Christopher Reeve version, because it looks like him. And Superman literally exemplifies virtue. Everything we need to know, everything we strive for as people. And it's not an accident that this Ubermensch showed up in the American population, popular culture during the Great Depression. It's not an accident that happened. We're talking about people, guys, men who were supposed to go out and protect and provide and couldn't. So now we have somebody who actually does that. And he's good to his mom. He helps old ladies across the street. That old standby Superman, he can literally do anything, but he has the time to stop and help cats out of the trees and, come on, yes.
Is there any meaning to the colors that are chosen for his uniform? Because the red, yellow, and blue are like the three primary.
A little bit. So what we're talking about is when these publishers first started in the 30s, they were poor and were greedy, and red, blue, green, those primary colors were easy and cheap if they were allowed to use those. So that's why up until, the 70s, this is what you saw because they were considered cheap for little boys and we need to make money off of it, so screw it. There you go. That's it. And there's also another, do you guys know why they wear their underwear on the outside? That's always been a joke. Because they were modeled after circus strongmen. That makes sense. Like, oh, and it's just stuck. Yeah.
I was just going to add something to what she was saying.
Yeah.
If I may.
Yeah.
One of the things that my mom does is she does the art history, so the history of colors. And one of the things that red means, or used to mean, was masculinity and aggressiveness. And one of the things that yellow means is compassion, and then blue is supposed to mean like temperament. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you see a lot of red around him, you know, and definitely nowadays, you know, because I read DC Comics, you see a lot more of red and blue. So, I mean, maybe that was supposed to symbolize, you know, masculinity. Get up, do your work at the coal mine or wherever you work in the 30s, you know, and
Maybe.
be more active.
Yeah, maybe. So there's got to be, he's linked with moral purity, so there's got to be a correlation between how he's drawn and how we view him, how we understand him. So when we see things like this, you guys know who this is, guy, right? You guys don't? That's Thanos from the Avengers movie, last Avengers movie. No? Anyway, Thanos, how do we know, just by looking, if you didn't know who this was, how do you know he's a bad guy? What?
Red eyes.
His red eyes. He has no pupils. What else? Yeah.
By the way the contrast is drawn. So like, for example, for rated R movies, if there's supposed to be like a thriller or like a horror film, there's a lot more dark lighting. It's a lot more brooding. It's a lot more like serious. You're like, for example, Taken with Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
There's a lot more darker angles in it.
Yep.
And that's how you're supposed to know that's more of a serious tone.
Well, not just that, but notice that he's actually looking down on us. Notice how he's sitting. The grim, so he looks human-like, but we know something's off about it. So even if you don't know who this is, you automatically know and understand he's a bad guy. He's called the Mad Titan. Thanos? No? Nothing. Okay. Or something like this. Here we have Dr. Doom, a bad guy. We have Tony Stark, Iron Man. Now, what's fascinating to me is that they're very, very similar. They're both wearing armor that helps them and gives them all kind of abilities. But one is seen as a hero and the other one is seen, just by looking at the pictures, one is the hero and one is a villain. How do we know that?
Maybe it's the eyes.
The eyes? Okay.
There's a lot going on with eyes and white light as
Good.
opposed to green.
Plus it's this whole kind of head down and kind of shrouded. Something's going on. He's mysterious, at least mysterious. So what we're talking about here is how images represent, mean, or stand in for things in the real world. But the way the images present lets you know something about how we wish to understand it. And this goes throughout our comic book history. So here, I love this picture. We all know who this is, right? She was created in 1942 by Dr. Marsden as to be a feminist icon. Her and Rosie the Riveter were largely used throughout the 40s as that, to get women out of the house and into the factories and build bombs and planes and stuff. So she's this feminist icon, but I have a serious question. Why is each boob bigger than her head? Why? So you guys realize that's armor. What is that actually protecting? Why is she standing like that? So if she's a feminist icon, who is she actually drawn for? The male gaze. And this is how the male gaze interrupts that notion of female uplift. Does that make sense? So largely she's posed like that for, I don't know, some reason. There's no real narrative reason why she's doing it, or no real character reason other than to undermine, right? So what it does is it keeps the status quo. So things like this. This is, I like this because this is different depictions of Batman throughout the years. What's fascinating to me is they're all different Batmans, but we all recognize them as Batman. So even though like this one is smiling, we have a vampire Batman, we have the detective Batman, we have more ninja Batman, we've got another smiling Batman. We all, big ears, little ears, blue costume, black costume, we all recognize them as Batman. Why? How? That's a good question, because it's about image and how it uses subtle things that we recognize as Batman, so we put them all together, we go, oh, that's Batman. Once again, it uses that vague specificity. Like here, this is actually my comic I scanned. And I bought this because it was like Prince. Oh my God, of course I'm buying that comic. I don't care what's in it. It's Prince's. So in this comic book, we get the motorcycle. If you guys recognize the motorcycle from the movie Purple Rain, even though it's the wrong color. But we also get the Prince. Prince is from the late 1980s. The motorcycle is from the early 1980s from the movie. So even though they don't go together or shouldn't go together, we still understand them that they do go together because they somehow all sign to us Prince. Does that make sense? Yes. So let's talk about gutter. The gutter is the blank spot in between the frames, the comic book frames. So what we're looking at here is this is the first two panels of a very, very good book by Alison Bechdel called Fun Home, a family tragicomic that's now a play on Broadway. That's really cool. So what we're getting here in the first panel is something of traditional sitcom where it's the fourth wall. You guys know the fourth wall, right? Yes. Where in sitcom, if the camera's there, the audience is there, we'll see that wall, we'll see that wall, we'll see that wall, but not that wall, because that's where the audience sits. Mm-hmm. So it's like we just happen to be there watching this conversation unfold. So it's very objective and it's very pulled away. When we get to see everything, that means we, the viewer, get to pick what we want to see. So if that's true here, something had to happen here in order to move the camera to Dad's face. So it's much more closer up personal. So for that to make sense, we, the reader, have to input whatever happens between these two in order to make sense. This is the power of comic books. This is where the power lies, in that for this to make sense, you, the reader, have to help make the narrative make sense. You get to help create meaning in the book. Yes? So this is one of the reasons why I love comic books. Like this right here. So the relationship between wording and visual, comic books, you cannot separate the two. That doesn't exist. Some books, like children's books like Winnie the Pooh, they will have images and words, but they prioritize the wording over the visual, or the wording will describe the visual. Here, they work together. You cannot split them apart. So here, this is a panel from the book V for Vendetta by Alan Moore. And in this moment, we have little Evie down here in the corner, and she walks into this guy's room. This guy runs the Church of England, and we know he's corrupt and a bad guy. And in this moment, we get how and why. Evie's in trouble. Do you guys pick out how she's in trouble, what that specific danger is? And notice that it's not directly told to us. It's one of those you have to figure it out by what's said, by the color, and what's there. Do you guys figure it out? Say again? Yeah. But she says, this is the other room? Not too extravagant, I trust. It's that pause, not too, ew. And then you look at the bed, the focal point, and you see what? An upside down pentagram. See it? Mm-hmm. So we get not only is she in danger, but we're told implicitly what kind of danger she's in. This guy, even though he's the head of the church, he's a predator. Yeah, it's one of those moments. Yeah.
What about the leopard skin?
Yeah,
You said predator.
Yeah.
It's like right there.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. This is, yeah, this whole, it's not too extravagant. This is one of these weird disconnects where we like to think of the clergy as humble, non-materialistic people. And you walk into this room and he's got all this stuff. Ew. Yeah.
And you can also, I mean, this is my bias,
Yeah.
but from the data that you've shown and looking at the picture, you can also see that to tell that he's a predator, what, like how he puts stuff when he is wording it,
Mhm.
and then how big the bed is compared to the rest of the room,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in that frame of reference, you know, from the audience looking in,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're seeing what Alan Moore wants us to see.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. So artists and comic book artists and comic book writers literally construct how they want us to understand something. So like this is how the use of color. This is one of my favorite books by Hergé. Hergé was a Belgian writer, comic book writer. He wrote Tintin. There've been many iterations of Tintin through HBO did a show on Tintin for a little while. So this Hergé was really influenced by the Boy Scout credo. So he invented the character Tintin, who is the Boy Scout. So they're basically, the stories are really short, but they're really colorful, and they have they're basically boys adventure stories. In this particular story, Tintin's friend Chang's plane has gone down in the Himalayas. Everybody's like, oh, Chang is dead, it's so sad, he was such a good guy. And Tintin's, no, Chang is alive and I know it, and I'm gonna go find him. So he pulls all of his buddies together and they tromp off to the Himalayas. And this is the moment where the audience gets the information before Tintin. If you guys can see back here, there's the silhouette of Tintin and his party. So the audience gets information before they do. Now, just by looking at the color, what's going on? Is Chang alive?
I don't think so.
Well, why not?
Mostly just snow.
Yeah. There's no evidence that a person is there. There's nothing upturned, no snow swept away, there's no evidence of fire, nothing. But look at the color. Notice how the plane itself is almost the same color as the mountains. Notice that the crackwork here looks very similar to the crackwork here in the mountains. It's like the mountains already claimed it. So just from what's depicted here, without saying a word, and just by using color, Hergé has told us Chang's not alive, he's not here, there's nothing alive here. Before they've even gotten there. Well, it turns out in the book, this is a red herring, that Chang is alive. He got rescued by some snowmen, abominable snowmen. And there's a whole Scooby-Doo chase sequence and running and jumping, because it's a boys adventure story. Yeah. So figures. So figures, how figures are used. This is from a book called Kingdom Come by Mark Waid, who it's a really interesting retelling of revelations from the Bible, but using Superman. So what you're seeing here is, this is all, the artwork is done by a guy named Alex Ross. He doesn't actually draw it, he paints these. These are huge paintings, like 5x7. So he has to paint like 200 paintings for one book. So it takes forever. But yeah, and then he sells them for crazy amounts of money. So in this thing, you get to see how do we know that these superheroes are super and they're not regular human? Well, how are their figures used to let us know that? Look at the way they literally, every single one of them are looking down on the little guy here. Notice how they're all wearing color. We got the Superman stance, bless you.
Thank you.
We got, and then we see this little guy here. He's got his back to us, but he's hunched over, and he's moving away, like he's scared. But we have Atom Smasher, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Superman, Power Girl, and Hawkman, all standing well. So literally it tells us then, oh, these people are different. The Superman is literally with the focus, well, the whole dad move. So what I'm getting at here is, what does this all mean? So meaning occurs when the intention meets the expectation. So when we're looking at Batman, we expect it to be this way, but it looks this So that's why it looks. So when the expectation meets that. Meaning is about how these images speak to us and what we find useful in them. There's a reason why Batman is so popular to this day. Batman's been around 80 plus years. Why Superman has been around for so long. Or why Superman got a little crazy in the 50s where they had Super Horse, Super Cat, Super Dog, Supergirl, Superboy, and Superman at the same time. It was bad. It got really, really bad. Because they had no idea what they were doing or what stories to tell. Meaning is a reflection of accepted knowledge and understanding. So it's not just what we're seeing, is how it's reflected back at us at the same exact. Yes? Okay, so examining meaning allows us to understand the different eras and mindsets, what was going on at that particular time, like this. This is from 1966. This is from Action Comics 273, where Mixus Pitlick throws sneezing powder all over the earth, and Superman has to suck it up with his super breath, because physics, right? and then because he does, he has to sneeze, a super sneeze, and has to go, he literally goes to a dead solar system to sneeze in space, and he literally blows away the solar system. I have another comic, I couldn't find it for this, one still of it. I have a comic book where he's actually juggling planets. So this is the height of the Cold War. And this is our Ubermensch. Does that make sense? Do you see the correlation now? Or you see things like here in the 1980s, beneath 150 billion tons stands the Hulk, and he's not happy. Now the idea, and I think everybody knows this, is the angrier the Hulk gets, the stronger he gets. But 150 billion tons, really? Come on.
Why not?
So like this, or we love to have comic book artists and writers are really lazy. So we have things like what is universally accepted as the universal bad guy or universal evil. And this is from 1942, Captain America #1, where he's literally socking up Adolf Hitler. Superman did this too, by the way, socked him up. And so it was, we have our guy, Captain America, yay, awesome. He was Marvel's answer to Superman, their Ubermensch. This is the guy everybody's trying to stand up and be. But this type of heroic American fell out of favor, and Captain America got canceled for about 15 years in the 50s. And in fact, but the universal evil kept going. So this comic book is The Unknown Soldier from the 1960s, where we still have the universal evil. Even though it's not really apt anymore, the whole 1960s, it was a completely different America than the 1940s. But yet, here's the accepted and universal evil, right? So we're lazy. We automatically see this, okay, the ultimate evil. It's Hitler. Or this, I love this. When Lex Luthor first started, he was an evil scientist. And this is not a mistake. We're talking about the atomic age, right? So the evil bad guy just happens to be an evil scientist. Well, that lasted until mid to late 70s, 80s, where Lex Luthor was turned into an evil businessman. The 1980s, that makes complete sense. Wow. But that's changed again, and now he's a politician. I wonder, what does that have to do with what's going on right now? So this is a way I love studying this stuff, because what it does is it reflects how we're viewing ourselves in our culture at this time in this particular place. Yes. So sorry to rush through that. There's a whole bunch more I could have talked about, but if anybody has any questions for me, this is a great time because we have a couple minutes here.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So how did you come up with this presentation?
Well, it's what I study. So my area of expertise is comic books, but this is part and parcel some of the things I've been talking about in my dissertation. There's a whole lot more, and I can probably add like $3 or $4 words in there. But yeah, really long, multi-syllable words. Oh yeah.
Is there a difference between experiencing these characters and concepts by reading a comic book and by going to see the movie? What's the difference in
I would guess
experience?
I guess it would be in the medium itself, because The movies, you are passively letting the story hit you, whereas a comic book, you're much more active in participating in the creation of the story. In the sense by the gutter, in the sense by the coloring, by the sense, that kind of thing. Where a movie, it's happening for you. Yes.
You fill in more.
Yes, you
Make
fill in
it
more. So
yourself.
therefore, it's much more requisite, and you get to tailor it to you. Yes, sir.
I was gonna add on,
Yeah, sure.
if I may.
Yeah.
I know it's your presentation, but I'm
Yeah.
really adamant. My bias of it is that a comic book, like for example, one of my favorites, Watchmen, that only ran
Yep.
till about the mid '80s. They made a 2009 version called The Watchmen, and basically it was about dealing with your superpowers as a superhero in like New York during the '80s. So I feel the way a comic book hits you is more personal. Like for me, I like the Punisher and Batman, you know, because they're black, but they're also, you know, very poetic and very, you know, straightforward and very brooding, you know. But what I'm trying to say is that a comic book from the movie is very a comic book is very raw. Movies are more politically correct, if I can use that.
Sometimes. And so when you're talking about characters like the Punisher, anti-heroes that become very, very popular since Dirty Harry. So you have characters like the Punisher, you have characters like Deadpool, characters like Wolverine. They're very, very popular. So they're good guys, but they'll end up breaking your leg and sending you to the hospital to get the job done. That's Dirty Harry-ish. Yeah, it's so. My answer is really about the subtlety between the two. So the repeat again is the difference to me is in the participation by the reader or the watcher of the book is much more profound because it's much more personal, and you can read it at your own pace, whereas a movie happens. Well, we have the ability now to pause most movies, except if you're at the theater. Yes?
One more quick question.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you were talking about stereotypes.
Oh, yeah.
So I've always thought stereotype is a negative sort
It
of
can be.
connotation, but in this sense, it's a positive connotation because you're relating to this genre of
Yeah.
literature
It can
in the
be.
same way.
It can be positive. I try to understand it as a way of understanding the world. So stereotypes can save your life if you're going, hey, I've seen that dark alley in I don't know how many horror movies, or I hear that music, I'm done, I'm out, I'm done. Well, I get to go home. But at the same time, if you use stereotypes in the way that we're all thinking, where it constructs our reality and social truths, that becomes very detrimental for women, for people not in places of power, right? So that can be very detrimental. There's a fine line between there. So comic books have done that too. Oh, they've done that too. And one of them was Whitewash Jones, Ebony White. There's a whole slew of Rachel from Gasoline Alley that are caricatures of African Americans. There's one that I picked, I didn't show you guys, from 1988 that's literally, it's gotta be an answer to the Iran-Contra affair, where his name is Snowflame. He's a Colombian drug lord, and his powers are super strength, agility, stamina, it's typical superhero stuff, but he only gets his powers when and if he snorts cocaine. So the more cocaine he snorts, the stronger he gets.
Very, very 80s.
And you're like, oh wow, that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense.
It's a shout out to the Cali cartel.
Yeah. It's so we see that reflected a lot in comic books, where what is his name? It's gonna bug me. There was a comic book character, DC comic book character in the 80s. He was called the Leader, where he was the stereotypical evil white guy, and he was so over the top racist. He was like, but he had a really cool power, where he would, if he talked, he could hypnotize other white people who were listening into believing what he was saying. It was really fascinating. And so there was a whole plot about him he was hired by some businessman to gentrify a black neighborhood. So he got the white people in the surrounding neighborhoods to like do evil things like destroy their houses, throw rocks, to get him to move out so he could build his high rise or whatever. What was his name? Was it the leader? But he was interesting because he was literally depicted as a Klan member with the stars and stripes everywhere. But he wore a hood. And you go, oh, evil. Okay, yeah, that's the bad. But yeah, so I love this stuff. I could talk about this stuff all day. Anybody else? Question? Yes, ma'am.
So, on the topic of stereotypes,
Mm-hmm.
I don't read comic books.
Yeah. Okay.
I love comics. I love the Sunday comics.
Okay.
But a lot of them are, now, and when we're looking back, they seem really obvious to
Mhm.
us, these negative stereotypes
Oh, yeah.
in particular, and the positive ones too.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward a little to now,
Yeah.
21st century, what's happening in current, today comic books? in
That's a
terms of
very good
this, or
question.
Is it a little more subverse or?
Kind of, then again, no. So we're seeing some extremes. So in 2014, Teen Titans #1, they rebooted it, and DC got a whole bunch of crap on it because Wonder Woman's sidekick, she's 15, she's completely sexualized on the cover. Where she's standing, if I had a picture I'd show you, where the way she's posed, she's in her hero fighting costume, but it's platform high heels. And you're like, yeah, really?
So they're
Things
not
like,
that subtle.
No, it's not. Well, comic books aren't subtle.
No.
Or the book by Mark Waid called Strange Fruit, the same year, 2014, where it depicted a black guy wrapping himself in the Stars and Bars flag. And it was, the whole idea was he is like not just the Ubermensch, but the black version, I guess. But he wrapped himself in the Stars and Bars, and nobody understood why he had to wrap himself in the Stars and Bars flag. But at the same time, we're getting other iterations where we get Kamala Khan of Ms. Marvel, who's actually drawn and written by a Muslim woman. So she's 15, and she doesn't have enormous boobs. She doesn't walk around in skin-tight cat suits or with platform shoes. Her costume is actually functional. And the comic book doesn't focus on her powers. It focuses on her being an Arab American and what that means as far as she's getting crap from her friends for not wearing hijab. She wants to eat bacon, but doesn't want to. She's obligated not to. She speaks Urdu in the house. Her parents are talking about arranging a marriage, and she's got a crush on the blue-eyed white guy in her class and doesn't want to tell anybody in her family. That kind of thing. It's going very teenager things, as well as this other stuff she's doing because she's got these powers. So things are changing, but sometimes when you push one way, the extremists try to go the opposite way. It gets very, very interesting as far as when you start looking at comic books and you go, oh, there you go. There's another one. Yes?
I was going to say, just to add on before I have to go.
Yeah.
This is my last thing. The black superhero you were talking about that was draped in the Stars and Bars, that's actually really what's the word for it? It alludes to Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Yeah.
Which at the time in 2014, a lot of the Black Lives Matter was going on. So they did that to be like more of like what's actually going on with that superhero, and it's very political, but
it's also, you have to realize that the book was written by a white guy who never bothered to ask. There was a whole bunch of flack the second it came out. All these groups were like, no, And then he was like, oops, sorry, because he never asked anybody. It's really culturally insensitive. The rest of the book, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on there. Like, no, no. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? But he's since apologized. Yes.
Do you think that the people writing the comic books are like subconsciously putting in these stereotypes?
I
Or
think
do you think
so.
they're doing it on purpose to get us to like them because they're playing our
Maybe a little both. Maybe a little both. What is his name? Frank. The guy who wrote Return of the Dark Knight. What's his name? Frank. Thank you. Brain fart. Brain's not working. Frank Miller. You read anything he does, and Alan Moore too. Alan Moore is famous for this. Or anything he does, any kind of story, it tends to follow the same narrative and themes throughout it. There's any other book he's ever written, and you're like, I wonder what this is about again. Right? So we see a lot of writers do that, where they have a particular something they're trying to get across, and no matter what it is, they try to get it across. It comes across in everything they've ever written. Some of that is unconscious. Some of that is, I want people to pick this up. Some of that is, I want to be famous. Some of that is fantasy-based, power fantasies of, I get to control this, and therefore I'm going to make this into reality. There's all kinds of mitigating things in there, all kinds of that. And that's a whole book in and by itself, and I'm not even going there. I'm not going there. Anybody else? Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you think they consciously recreated that image on the Vogue cover?
Yeah,
With-
that's Annie Leibovitz, yes.
Wow. So
She's done a couple other ones. She did one in the early 2000s with Charles Barkley. Actually, it was the late 90s, early 2000s, where he is in muslin pants, white muslin pants, and he's literally breaking the shackles of like the yoke around his neck, and he's literally broken the shackles, and it's eerily similar to the Wedgwood relief of anti-slavery Wedgwood relief. You know, I'm your brother, right? So it's eerily similar. There's another one where she did Tiger Woods he's no shirt, and he's doing curls with two barbells. He's got a beanie on, and it looks like he's in jail. And you're like, why? It's not to say it's not provocative, but why? It doesn't make any sense to me why that's there. There are other ones that are like that. Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Wow.
oh yeah.
If you hadn't shown me that side by side, I don't know.
And
if I
that's part of it.
grabbed that.
That's the ubiquity of it, that it's so everyday and so here that we don't even bother to question it because it's always been here. It's always been like that. It's one of the things I'm talking about. Yeah. Any other questions? One more before we go? No? I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to come over and listen to me blather on for about an hour.
I enjoyed that.